With the trade deadline less than a week away, reports surrounding the Toronto Blue Jays are really starting to heat up, and we have MLB insider Keegan Matheson here to help break it all down and also go over the feelings surrounding the clubhouse. So, Keegan, first of all, thank you for returning. It is a great time to have you on because this Jays team is doing things that have never happened in my lifetime, at least in the regular season. So, welcome on. I'm really excited to talk some trades with you today because we are now 6-ish days away until the trade deadline, but less than that, actually. Time's flying.
These are good days, man. Most fun time of the year for some people. And it's down here in Detroit right now. So you see me hidden in this beautiful hotel room. This is the one corner of the room where you can't see empty beer bottles or my messy bed or anything. So real scenic down here in Detroit, man. But this is fun. Fun team to be around. They're making my job easy. It's there's a story every night, and this has been as surprising as anything, man. I did not see it coming.
Nope. I mean, you were on here before the season. You were on here like a couple months ago, and now you're here at the absolute peak. So an absolute ride. But let's dive into a couple things here. Now, let's start with the trades a little bit. I'll get that going. We'll dive into the Jays a little bit after. So this is going to be, I mean, people are using the words all in, all these different things. This is going to be the most important trade deadline in the Ross Atkins era, at least in my eyes. I mean, this is going to be, again, he joined 2016. If you want to count that, you can. This is going to be crazy, and there's a lot of reports. I want to pop this one up first. I mean, it's Shi Davidi. He kind of came on with Jesse and gave some interesting takes here. He says he expects the Jays to add one, maybe two relievers, depending on what happens on the starter side, maybe a third reliever. The starting pitching side, there's a lot going on there. With all these reports floating, we're hearing Jeff Passan throw Mitch Keller's name into the cookie jar a lot here surrounding the Jays. What is your feeling surrounding Ross Atkins and his plan, at least as it pertains to at least the positions they're going for? Because if you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said starting pitcher, clear cut. Now you have Eric Lauer doing great, Manoah nearing a return, which we'll dive into later. I'm feeling like they're going to go all in on relievers here. What's the feeling you're getting around the team down there in beautiful Detroit?
I think so too. There's just not enough high-end pitching right now in this market. Now, at the same time, maybe there's another kind of Berríos style deal out there somewhere that wasn't the most obvious back in 2021 either. But if you're the Blue Jays right now and you can bet on Alek Manoah being at least something late in the season, adding a number three or a number four starter doesn't matter. It doesn't excite me. Adding someone who's going to pitch in game four or five of a series, whatever. What the Blue Jays need right now is a number one, number two type because Kevin Gausman, I think, is about to be that again. I think he's showing he's capable of that. And Berríos is solid, Bassett's solid, Scherzer's the wild card, I think. But you need someone who can win a game. And this market's not huge on those arms. Doesn't look like Jacob deGrom will move. Maybe Seth Lugo is kind of over that line if he's someone that does move, but there's not a lot of ace caliber pitching on the market. So go all in on the bullpen. I think it makes a ton of sense. And good teams have Jeff Hoffman, but great teams have Hoffman plus one or two other closers. And in Toronto, I think people always use that 2015, was it Royals example,
Was it?
because the Jays ran up against that. But that was kind of the dawn of this era's version of the super bullpen. And we've seen that be popularized as bullpens are being leaned on heavier, not just as specialists, but as game winners and active strategy. So I think that's going to be a big part of this. You can go in heavy on relievers. They don't need to be rentals, though. I think back through a lot of Ross Atkins acquisitions, there's Jordan Hicks. That's a rental. That one worked. The season didn't work, but that move
He's
worked
amazing.
out.
Yeah.
But you also look back through a couple of Marlins trades with Zach Pop, Anthony Bass, Adam Simber in that other deal as well. Those guys all came with some level of control. Like the Simber deal, I think was an underrated one that I kind of keep in my mind as an example. That unless Ross Atkins is targeting a legitimate like game changer on the back end, if he's targeting more of a mid bullpen guy, they typically like to get some control as well. And that takes care of next year and the year after. So bullpen makes too much sense to me. The lineup even, I think bullpen is the priority. And I might even put rotation over lineup. The lineup is really fitting together well right now. And same thing for me, unless you are going out and landing Eugenio Suarez or something like that, another depth guy doesn't excite me. And the example I use for that is the Whit Merrifield trade from a couple of years back. At that time, that move made
Yep.
sense. It took care of them that year and the next year. Right now, a move like that wouldn't matter much to me. Looking for a veteran, a utility guy, a corner outfielder, unless they're really, really damn good, whatever. This team is good enough. And that's why I think the Jays need to be aiming high and making one or two big moves instead of three or four small ones. And that starts in the bullpen, man. It's the obvious names are out there from some of the big closers. When you look to the Twins, the Guardians, the bullpen they'll have available, even the A's, if you want to try to pry Mason Miller from someone. But it's also that time of year where I love the trade deadline, and it's also my least favorite time of year because it brings out a lot of media BS. And it's easy for me to just list 17 names just to get myself aggregated. But and I think too many people who work in the quote unquote real media uh, play that game, and I don't like it. But those are the types of players, not specific names that I
Yep.
have intel on or anything. But you got to aim big, man. This season's a gift. It doesn't come around all that often. And when you go from an expected 500 team to the best team in baseball, you got to go all in, man. There's no better time. There has never been a better time than right now.
Yeah, and the all in is an interesting thing. You make a good point about the starter. I've been on record saying, I mean, a lot of people are, it's not just me, but like if they add and we'll dive into Mitch Keller in a second here. I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are. Like if you add a Mitch Keller, he is very, very good. Does he win this team or give a team a higher chance to win in a 3-game series compared to Chris Bassett, Kevin, Gosman, all those guys? I don't know. Dylan Cease's name was thrown out there by John Heyman. A team's expressing interest or had made a call. Like this is the type of guy to me where I would go for a starting pitcher because I think he can start in a playoff game. Obviously, not having the best year this year, but we know what he can do, right? He is elite, and he actually provides some velocity. Other than that, even though he's having a down year, I think it has to be bullpen. I mean, I want Eugenio Suarez more than anyone. Ramon Laureano makes a ton of sense to me as well. Probably will cost a little bit, but I believe he also has a team option next season, which would make for some interesting stuff here. But regarding Dylan Cease, like this is about the only starter, and you mentioned like for a while there was Jacob deGrom rumors, there was things like that. I don't think the Rangers are going to end up even selling, but we'll see what happens with that. Cease, if no Dylan Cease, I would just focus on getting 3 bullpen arms, or maybe they go for a starting pitching trade there. But I agree with you. I mean, the Mitch Keller thing doesn't move me. I'm not sure if it moves you. I know people are kind of split on that. Like, I don't hate the move. He is probably better than like Chris Bassett for a playoff start, I would maybe say. But other than that, I think, Dylan Cease, for some reason, I have faith in Ross Atkins pulling this one off if he becomes available. But again, you're competing with a lot of high end packages here.
Yeah, Cease at least has upside. And Mitch Keller, I mean, of course, I like him as a pitcher. Everybody does. He's making the money. He's making the contract he's on for a reason. But any Mitch Keller move would be about the bigger picture
Yep.
of the team. And that move would be about Chris Bassett and Max Scherzer hitting free agency next year. It would be about Kevin Gausman having only 2026 left. Berríos has an option after 26. So I do still think that's really relevant. The Jays always, no, every team does this, but especially the Blue Jays want to do their business 1 year early. And that's why I think that a multi-year starting pitcher is still the likeliest move here if there is something like that. Because Keller, with at least a couple years left here, when is he a free agent? Free agent in 2029.
Yep.
So that would bridge that gap. And then you hope maybe that one of Trey Savage, Cal Steven, Johnny King turn into a legit MLB starter. I'd love to tell you all 3 are going to. It's not going to happen. But if you get one out of those 3 who's a legit top end guy, you win. So Cease, someone like DeGrom, maybe Lugo, those top end guys are what excites me.
Yep.
I think that's where they should be focusing. But I could still see a move of the genre of Mitch Keller, not him specifically, but the lazy answer that I don't like giving is that oftentimes with the Blue Jays front office, it's someone we're not expecting. And especially when it comes to players that have team control remaining, like that Merrifield deal, like Berríos, who I mentioned earlier. And I say that because the Blue Jays have money. And some teams who are going for the playoffs right now, they're up against it financially. And they are just trying to make this year work. But the Blue Jays have Scherzer, Bassett, Bichette coming off the books, Chad Green coming off the books, a lot of money next year. So they can take on cash. And that puts them in some conversations that other teams cannot be in, which, again, brings me to players like Keller, pitchers who have some term remaining on their contracts. And because of that, I find myself every trade deadline, I find myself sitting here seeing a trade that goes through and thinking, oh, I never even talked about that guy.
Yeah. I mean, we think back to, you mentioned the Whit Merrifield, that happened like last minute, if I recall correctly, on that trade
Yeah.
deadline out of nowhere. José Berríos out of nowhere as well. And I remember at the time, the fan sentiment was the Jays overpaid. That was crazy. Austin Martin, they're recently number 5. You got him as a steal. Things happen quickly. Mitch Keller, you can see his stats here. Like, I think if I only bring him up so much because Jeff Passan on 3 separate occasions has mentioned him as the, not necessarily reporting that he is the number 1 option, but has mentioned him as a perfect fit. I think, and David Bednar paired with Mitch Keller, that would make a lot of sense to me. David Bednar is an extremely good reliever, one of the top guys on my list. And then, of course, Dylan Cease, we know what he can do. It's a very intriguing conversation, and it's crazy. I want to circle back for a second. Alek Manoah, do you actually think that he has a chance to pitch for the Jays in games that matter? Because I was mentioning it on my video. I think he's going to be very good for them next year. I have full faith in Alek Manoah. He looked great before he went down and had to get Tommy John surgery, even though he struggled a little bit before that, of course. I don't know if the Jays have a lot of runway here to give him to, rehab at the major league level, if that makes sense. Because if you go out and he has, let's say, 3 starts in a row where he puts up a 6 ERA, but his stuff is slowly coming back, that's 3 games. You could lose yourself in a division that right now the Jays are number 1 in the MLB. Obviously, we're all going to celebrate that. But I don't know if they have as much time to do that as they would have expected, because who expected the Jays to be first in the MLB at this point? I don't think anyone could have. And if so, you're probably a very rich man. So it's interesting to me there. The Manoah thing is, I think, the complete difference maker between going after a guy like Mitch Keller. Again, he has control, I guess more of a rental guy, or having faith, because Eric Lauer is the new, I mean, whether you want to call him, I think Chris Blackstone called him the 2015 Chris Colabello. I've been calling him the Marco Estrada a little bit. You could argue he's, a lot of different things. Eric Lauer's been fantastic. I don't know how much, room here the Ross Atkins front office has to give Alek Manoah at the major league level. I feel like they'd be better off giving him that at the AAA level.
Yeah, he doesn't pitch unless there's an injury, I don't think, at this point. And what are we, July 26th? His next appearance is going to be a sim game. He's been pitching in single A. There's probably still 3 or 4 weeks left in this rehab until the earliest he can be ready, which is one thing. And then where's his stuff at? Just because he's built back up doesn't mean that he has pinpoint control, doesn't mean that he has his best slider, that type of stuff. So I view Alek Manoah the same way I view Anthony Santander right now, which is that you have to plan to be without them for the rest of the season. And if something happens and they do something, cool. That's a
Yeah.
bonus. But even if Manoah, let's say 1 month from now, the Jays have the same rotation they have right now and Manoah's healthy, I don't think he just jumps onto the roster. I think that you keep rolling the same 5 the Blue Jays have. There's no problem with them. Yeah, they can always be better, but there's no problem. There's no squeaky wheel. And Manoah's just there. And if Scherzer's thumb acts up again, or if somebody's shoulder gets cranky, then you have Alek Manoah. But I don't think that you bump him onto the roster just to get him on the roster. I don't think that's how this is going to work. And the same with Santander. He's there. If something happens, great. But I think the Jays need to plan as if he's not going to play for them this year. Same with Manoah. So I don't think Manoah can be in consideration while they're making deadline decisions. I don't think Ross Atkins is going to be sitting there and thinking, you know what, don't need a guy because we have Manoah coming back. He's coming off Tommy John, and it's been a few years since he was an effective MLB starter.
Sure.
I'm always hoping for the best for Alek Manoah, and I've loved watching him embrace this recovery. Like I'm happy for him that he's getting close, but the realities are what they are. And it's been a few years for Alek Manoah, and he's coming off TJ. So it would be a hell of a story, but unless something else goes wrong, I don't know if it's a story I'll be covering this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe 2015, 2016 Marcus Stroman playoff vibes there. Maybe I'll hope for that. But quickly here, you mentioned the Santander thing. Let's just assume, I don't think he's going to play this year. It's just the weirdest injury, or we don't even know what's going on. I can't pick up a bat. Regardless of that, do you think they're actually going to make a move for a bat, or do you think that's just, I know you said that's probably the lowest on your priority list. I'm trying to think in my head of, names outside of Eugenio Suarez. I mentioned Ramon Laureano because they have David Schneider now, who's been very good since returning from AAA, who has been mashing lefties. Clement, who usually mashes lefties, struggling a little bit. Is that something you think is actually a realistic possibility, like acquiring a right-handed hitter? Suarez, like that would be the long shot. If it happens, I would be over the moon. But Ramon Laureano, like there's some other Harrison Bader, players like that. it's interesting. Do you think that's something that Ross Atkins is actively, obviously he's looking at, he looks at everything, or do you think they're just going to fully go? I could see a trade deadline here where they literally just acquire 3 relievers and one of them being one of the top end guys, maybe not Johan Duran or someone like that, but really good relievers. The hitting side, I would love to see them add one more bat that has power from the right side. I think that would really give me a sigh of relief, just because we see against those lefties, like, yes, Miles Straw has been fantastic. David Schneider has been fantastic. I don't know if I'm fully confident in a playoff game to start a guy like Miles Straw or start a guy even to the degree of David Schneider if he cools off at all. And I think getting a right-handed hitter here, because I don't think Santander's going to play, would be some big insurance. And I feel like every team that makes deep playoff runs always either have a guy like Eugenio Suarez or someone of that nature, or add one at the deadline to a similar caliber of a guy like Ramon Laureano, who just mashes and has a clear-cut role in the lineup.
Yeah, it needs to be somebody who raises the ceiling like that against lefties or like Suarez just across the board. There's too many names out there. And every trade deadline we do this, we think that a trade will make a guy good again.
Yep.
Like the amount of talk I've heard about Luis Robert, like he sucks this year.
Yep.
Like, why is a trade going to turn him into a 900 OPS guy again? And I keep seeing that reported. Oh, a trade will really bring. Why? It's maybe it does by chance, but I don't get that. And if I'm an MLB GM, I want to trade for a guy that's actually performing, not a guy who did well a couple years ago and you hope some magic new address and area code is going to fix him. So the hitting pool is also kind of like, Naylor would have been an interesting one with some power. And the Mariners made, I think, a good move to get him. But unless it's Suarez, Laureano, like the guys who can do something either in a platoon or completely raise the ceiling of the lineup, again, it's a weird one. I keep coming back to what I called that lazy answer though. More than anything on the position player side, Bo Bichette is a free agent after this year. Maybe Jimenez can slide over. Maybe they choose not to do that. But we did not see the Jimenez move coming whatsoever. But that got the Blue Jays a couple years ahead of something. The Blue Jays could explore using this deadline as a way to get ahead of patching up their infield for next year as well. And I just always feel kind of that looming threat from this front office, which is a good thing if you're a Jays fan, that they're trying to get ahead of stuff. But position player wise as well, just like I said with starting pitchers, where they could try to get a year or two ahead of stuff, they could do that in the trade deadline. Because if not, then in November, December, we're going to be having the conversation of who is the Blue Jays shortstop next year. And I've said 100 times that Jimenez could slide over and do that. But in a world without, without the shift, your second baseman needs to be a good defender too. Your second baseman can't just be like the stocky power hitter guy anymore, And we've seen the value of Jimenez as a second baseman. That's who he's been. There's an argument for leaving that alone. Like, you've got the best second base defender on the planet. Cool. And maybe we're having a conversation in November or December about who that long-term option is. And yeah, maybe it's Arjun Namala. Maybe Arjun Namala never makes the big leagues. We don't know this. Top prospects are hard until they're up to AA and AAA. So there's still that threat that something comes out of complete left field and surprises everyone just because of how this front office operates. And I'm not trying to couch things or leave a door open, but I think with position players, the focus has been it's going to be Suarez, it's going to be Laureano, it's going to be Naylor. But this front office has very rarely made the obvious move. They have very, very rarely made, the most aggregated name move type of thing. So it still starts with Suarez for me, though. I know he doesn't fit the Jays with the strikeouts and his defense sucks. That's okay. He hits a lot. But if he can play some DH, spell off with Springer, and hit like he's been hitting, the Jays can trade a bit of contact for a bit of power right now. They've done well enough with that. And Suarez is still the name that the trade deadline is going to kind of orbit around right now because everybody will want him.
Yeah, I think he is a guy that, like, crystal clear helps your chances at winning a World Series. Like, I don't think there's a debate about that for this team. And I mean, a new report came out from Ken Rosenthal saying the Angels are telling teams that their free agents are available. No one here super excites me. Taylor Ward's an interesting name. He's once again a power guy. Does he raise the ceiling? Maybe not now after the Davis. I think he's a better hitter than Davis Schneider. Definitely, has a longer tenure. But like these are the names that make things very interesting. And of course, Reed Detmers is another name that would make a ton of sense out of the bullpen. That's someone I really want to see them pursue. But at the end of the day, you're very correct. And Ben Nicholson Smith made a very good article, or I don't even know, it's a screenshot, whatever, doc of the trades that Ross Atkins has made in his tenure. It's always 3 moves or more when they are competing. And it is out of nowhere most of the time. Even thinking back to the Adam Simber stuff, I mean, Trevor Richards for Rowdy Tellez, when they made that trade in general, was a random one to a degree, even though they were shopping Rowdy. It is a very, I'm going to say, scary time to a degree, because I feel like for the first time I have very high expectations watching this team. Like, I'm trying to temper them, but then every single game they come out and they win. They could go out and beat Tarek Skubal tonight, and I would be not that surprised, which is something that I would never, ever say in the past. But it is a very interesting one. And I want to quickly dive into something that not a lot of people are talking about here. And again, you covered it yesterday. You had a very good tweet about how the Jays are great at baseball, these different things. We got the classic Jeff Passan tweet where he said that the Jays are first in Major League Baseball. When I saw that, I had a big smile on my face. The question mark is, I want to dive into the prospects a little bit, but more importantly, who the Jays could be shopping, or again, not reporting or anything like that. Just it's like my head keeps circling back. I don't think they're going to trade one of their top 2 unless that's a blockbuster deal. But outside of that, I could see them trading a guy like Joey Loperfido right now, which would kind of shake up the team. But is that something that Ross Atkins is thinking, okay, I'm going to sell in theory high? He's hitting like 350 so far this season, but he's also contributing to the team. And that's where the line is a little bit skewed here, because a lot of their players, they're 4A guys that other teams are probably interested in. Will Wagner, Joey Loperfido. They're actually contributing to the Major League roster, which makes this a little bit difficult. And of course, MLB Pipeline's new top 10 prospects here. I've seen Cal Stevens' name thrown out a lot, Johnny King, even Warren Watts Brown had a great start yesterday, rising his value. I'm concerned about who they're, or curious rather, who they're going to trade, that's actually on their team right now, because I feel like people aren't talking about that part enough. I think there's a lot of teams out there that want some players the Jays have that are beyond just their top 2 prospects of guys that have already graduated.
Yeah, it's got to be part of it. And I'll probably write about that today, honestly. The Loperfido, Wagner, David Schneider, Leo Jimenez is a guy who can play a big league shortstop and hit enough. Like, that would be valuable to someone, especially if you're trying to make a move, as a broad example, like Dylan Cease,
Yep.
with a team that's not exactly tanking right now. Um, Someone like Johnny King, 18 years old, that's an extremely attractive amount of upside. But if you are, yeah, I mean, if you're the Pirates or the A's or someone who's kind of rebuilding, retooling, yeah, age doesn't matter as much. But if you are the Padres or a team that's trying to compete next year immediately, you would also be attracted to someone like a Jimenez, a Loperfido, a Wagner who can play for you right away. I think back to the Matt Chapman trade. Gunnar Hoglund was the headliner of that, their first rounder. But they also, I think in that trade, traded Kevin Smith,
Kevin
the
Smith.
shortstop,
Yeah, it
who
was Kevin
was
Smith. Yeah.
at the time a pretty highly ranked prospect. Hasn't worked out, but at the time, highly ranked AAA guy who probably could have been in the big leagues. And that's an example that I would work with, because teams don't want to wait 4 years to see how this trade goes. And the Jays do have an excess, even down in AAA, still more of them. I mean, Aurelvis Martinez's stock is absolutely tanked, and I think it's going to keep tanking. But these are at least guys with upside who are 22, 23 years old. And Cal Steven, Johnny King, you Savages breakout. They've given the Jays options, and options are good. But I think everyone's on the table. There's no 2018 Vladdy in this system, you know? The Jays have shown a willingness to trade top guys. Gunnar Hoglund, Austin Martin in the Berríos deal with Simeon Woods Richardson. They traded Jordan Groshans back when they dealt him. They've traded plenty of top prospects. They have absolutely zero hesitation about that. And while Namala has been good and Yasavage has been great, they're not 2018 Vladdy, And unless you are 2018 Vladdy, whatever. It's looking back on all these trades the Jays have made, they haven't lost many of them.
Yep.
And man, 9 times out of 10, if you get the best player in a trade in baseball, you win it. Sometimes you're going to accidentally trade Fernando Tatis Jr. for, what was that, James Shields or something back in
Joe
the day.
Ryan for Nelson Cruz.
Oh boy, that's going to happen sometimes. But 9 times out of 10, if you get the best guy in the deal, you win the trade, and it stays that way. pretty much all the time when you sell a prospect, you're selling them at peak value. Like maybe a Relvis is not peak value right now, but look at everyone else in that top 10.
Good point.
Their value as a prospect is probably as high as it's ever going to be. And if one or two of these guys we're looking at right now in that top 10 image, if one or two of them turn out to be legitimate high end above average major leaguers, it's a huge success. I know we want every single prospect to work out and be a star. It doesn't happen. Like for people listening, fire up MLB Pipeline and use the toggle menu at the top to go back to
Years.
2016, 17, 18. It'll break your damn heart. Okay? This stuff doesn't work out. So if you can trade prospects for MLB talent right now, when you have a shot to win the World Series, go for it, man. And I always reference, like, I'm a big NBA basketball fan, and Brian Windhorst, the ESPN analyst, his saying is that winning a championship means you never have to apologize. And if the Jays win a title because they trade Namala, Savage, Tiedemann, King, I don't care if that guy goes on to be a Hall of Famer, whatever. You've won a World Series, and for the next decade, you don't have to apologize to anybody.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I always use that looking back at the years. I mean, you think back to a couple years ago, I mean, Nate Pearson was, there was a lot of, talks surrounding Nate Pearson where they could have got some star players. I think back to them missing out on Jose Ramirez. I forget the exact player who was in that package. It may have been Nate Pearson, whoever it was. And we're thinking, no, we'll never do that. Nate Pearson's going to be an ace. And you miss out on guys that if you would have made that trade at the time, where would the Jays be now with Jose Ramirez? Probably won at least one playoff game. And you mentioned if they go ahead and they, win the World Series, the fans will be happy. I would argue if they make it to the ALCS and they trade one of these prospects and they lose even in the ALCS, I would be fine. Obviously, if the prospect turns into a Hall of Famer, that would suck. But if they turn into a solid big leaguer, but the Jays ended up getting someone who helped make them to the ALCS or the World Series, like I want to see them win. I also want to see them win a playoff game. And I think that's something that this team finally has a chance to do, because also on the flip side of that, you mentioned how a lot of the prospects don't always turn great. Some of the prospects who were fairly highly, like Addison Barger, I had a video on him like 3 years ago saying how he's going to be the next Corey Seager. It was something about that. And then it took him a while, and then he finally figured it out. Like, it's very random when it comes to prospects. And I agree. I think Arjun Amala, Trey Savage, I don't know if their value is going to get any higher, bearing just an insane stretch of play over the next, 2 years or year. And Savage is going to be probably in the rotation next year, at least factoring in if he remains healthy. Namala, I mean, he is a ways away. Like 2028 is the ETA. You can see it there. I mean, we saw what happened with Ricky Tiedemann, but they suddenly now have a great, in theory, a decent, I'll say, prospect pool that a lot of teams are interested in. It's very, very intriguing to see what's going to happen. And kind of pivoting to that quickly here, do you have an idea on this? This is not reporting things you're hearing. I'll preface that. Do you have an ideal offseason of, say, 2 or 3 trade deadline of 2 or 3 players that you think are realistic, but also would make some sense for this Jays team, or even just players you want to see the Jays go after and acquire here? Because we'll know pretty soon. And again, they played Tarek Skubal in 5.5 hours now of the time of recording. Very curious to see how they go against that. But do you have an ideal trade deadline here that could maybe also impact their offseason like you've been mentioning? But I'm just curious to see what names you would like. Again, you don't have to, not reporting, but just throwing out there, players you would like.
I think starts from the bullpen with one closer caliber reliever and then one really good middle reliever. By really good middle reliever, I mean Eric Swanson when he was at his best, Chad Green when he was at his best, Jimmy Garcia when he's been healthy and good. Like that level where they're probably your third or fourth guy in line, but they can really help you in the 6th or 7th inning. I think that's important.
Yep.
But the other one has to be a closer caliber reliever. I think Jeff Hoffman's still the closer. I think he's going to be dynamite down the stretch. But closer caliber. Now, are you looking at
Class A?
Duran? Are you looking at Class A? Now, with Class A, there's been the inconsistencies. I think my mind is colored because I covered that ALCS last year for us between the Yankees and Guardians, and the whole thing where he was taking videos of his awards. I mean, cool, man. So maybe that's colored how I feel about Class A. But when you look at guys of that caliber, Miller's caliber, swing big, like one big ticket reliever plus a strong mid-range guy. The mid-range guy is probably the one you try to get some control on. Do they need 3? I don't know. But 2 that are at least in the top half of your bullpen. And then the other one for me is flexible. One controllable rotation or position player guy. Doesn't need to be both. I don't think the Jays need a starter and a reliever and a position player. I don't think they're going to touch on every base. It starts with the bullpen, a really good reliever and a good reliever. But then you've got to do one more thing that helps you beyond this year, even, I think, because the Jays have a window where they can run the AL East here now. And maybe that is something like a Keller or another Berríos style deal. And then on the position player side, maybe there's something else you find. I mean, if I was playing MLB The Show, I'd be going after Ketel Marte.
Ooh,
But, contracts are what they are. But you never know how eager the Diamondbacks are going to be. But one extra move, one more thing. And frankly, man, I think name value matters.
I
I
agree.
think entertainment value matters. In 2015, the first 4 months of 2015 didn't
Horrible.
matter. They were 500 balls club, like whatever. No one really cared. That trade deadline was so important, not because the Blue Jays got an expected batting average and an exit velocity. Like it wasn't any of that BS. It's because people had heard of David Price, they'd heard of Troy Tulowitzki, and it was cool as hell. That is what turned Toronto back in to the best baseball market in the world. And yeah, getting some good bullpen help, like that'll be cool. That'll help the energy. But when the Jays acquire a player that, your buddies who are hockey fans have heard of before, that's when it gets fun. That's what Tulo was. That's what David Price was. Those were moments of like, holy crap, the Blue Jays did that. So, man, if there's a name and like Suarez would qualify, Marte would qualify,
Johan
Cease would.
Duran.
Duran, I think, would be in there,
The
man. I love Duran's entrance, the whole energy persona around Duran. And then like you're intimidating people at that point. Right now I think the rest of baseball still looks at the Blue Jays as this like plucky upstart team.
Lucky
No,
as well, yeah.
and lucky. Oh yeah, the
Yank.
Pythagorean theorem. But it's they are one of the biggest markets in baseball, with one of the biggest payrolls in baseball, with one of the biggest stars in baseball, on one of the biggest contracts in the league. Like, come on, grow up. The Blue Jays are for real. Just because they're on this side of the border does not mean they're some gritty, scrappy, lucky team. And I think they're being miscast as that by a lot of U.S. coverage. And if the Jays make that big move with a big name, it's going to make a whole bunch of people say, oh no, the Blue Jays are for real. And they're going to be late on that realization, but they're going to be forced to.
Yeah, that was it gave me chills thinking about that. You mentioned the 2015 thing. I think name matters a lot too. Also, just the vibe of the fan base as well. I mean, the fans in 2015. I was rewatching yesterday randomly the David Price start against the Twins at
Oh
home
yeah.
and all those different things. Also, 2015, John Gibbons throwing David Price out there for 120 plus pitches. Miss those days. But anyways, it was a very like obviously fans. If the Jays get Reed Detmers, a lot of fans, especially the diehard fans, will know. Okay, that's a very good move. But my mom and dad aren't going to come down and tell me that, okay, the Jays got Well, maybe they did because they watch my videos. But other than that, you think back to the Tulowitzki move, it was like I don't know, I was 15, whatever it was. I remember it was like 2 a.m. and everyone was talking about it. Like everyone woke up I think it was very late in the night. I remember seeing it at the bottom of the score ticker and I was like, oh my, that's how news used to break. And then they got David Price. They got, LaTroy Hawkins, the guy I love to shout out in there, his last year in the MLB. If the Jays go out and get somebody, it everything elevates. And obviously the fans right now, I want to quickly wrap up in a minute here. Is it as loud in the stadium as it is? Unfortunately, I'm going to be going to a game soon, but is it as loud in the stadium? Haven't been able to go as of late as it is like on TV, because it seems very, very loud. And shout out to all the audio people on the doing the Jays work, because they're doing a really good job right now. It seems loud in the Rogers Center. And I also think, I mean, it's sold out like every night. It's crazy how fast things turn on a dime, to where we were talking about it. I think the second video you were on, or maybe it was before, like stadium was pretty dead there for a while, even early on in this year. Obviously it wasn't summertime and things like that. If you make a big splash, Suarez, Ketel Marte, even one of the big relievers, I mean, Toronto right now, the city is buzzing because of this Toronto Blue Jays team. And I think Ross Atkins feels that. And I think there's something to be said about give up that extra prospect to get something, because then it kind of translates to the clubhouse as well. Even the bigger names, I think that matters more to them too. Obviously, WAR, do the math, all those things. If you get a big name that is going to help your team, it just flows through the city. We saw it in 2015, and they were below 500, I believe, when they acquired Tulowitzki, and then they soared to win. So it was well, they didn't win, but they almost won, and it was a great year. I feel the same here. I feel like it's the city's buzzing right now. I would assume it's the same, like from you covering it every day, even around the clubhouse as well.
And all those fans, they buy tickets, they buy jerseys, they buy beer, they buy food, and all of that money goes to the Blue Jays, and they can keep this whole thing going, man. Like it matters. The business side of this matters. Because earlier in the year it was just kind of whatever,
Yes,
And there would be some okay crowds, but a lot of those crowds were there for a bobblehead or cheap hot dogs or
George Springer football jersey.
football jerseys or just family fun, and all of those things are good. I'm not against family fun and hot dogs, but there would be a lot of times in those games where the Jays are down 2-1 with the bases loaded in the ninth, and the stadium is still playing the everybody clap your hands thing. And I'm thinking, Mike, people should be able to realize that, okay? And it didn't feel like the most engaged crowds perhaps I'd ever been around. Now it does. And I started covering the team in 17 after those runs. These are by far the best crowds I've been around. I think even recent playoff games like that Mariners series included, that didn't feel like it had this energy. The players feel that, man. It matters. And you could see it in that Yankees series when they were kind of getting on top of the Yankees. I think at times Blue Jays crowds have the reputation of just kind of being happy to be there. Let's
Watchers.
have some dollar dogs and dance to the songs on the. But when Blue Jays crowds are at their best, like they were in 15 and 16, but when they're getting on top of the other team, that's cool. That's when this works. I think of all the times I've been at Yankee Stadium and a guy will make an error and they are chanting his name and jeering him and they're on
Yep.
top of him. you know, we don't need to be that polite in Toronto, okay? It's okay to be on top of a guy. It's what makes a home field truly an advantage. And I think we're seeing a bit more of that, man. These crowds have been absolutely incredible. John Schneider's gone out of his way to mention that 100 times. Bichette has. Like, it's pretty special. And when the Blue Jays become, the cool thing to do socially, it's a pretty rare experience. We saw it with the Raptors in 2019. We have not seen it with the Blue Jays in the last 10 years, but I think it's happening.
Yep. And I'm excited to see it. Keegan, thanks for popping on. Also, thank you for your Vladimir Guerrero Jr. tweet that has unlocked the new beast inside of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as he is now
And that really upset people. They didn't like that. I'm very sorry. If
What was I want to just ask this like on a personal note. Was there any backlash in the around the team when you tweeted that?
No, and I don't think there should have been. It's how do I say it without saying that Toronto's a soft market?
Toronto,
It's
I'll say it. Toronto's a soft market. There we go.
Toronto can be a very friendly market at times. Maybe that's how I'll do it. If and listen, Vladdy's been spectacular since the All-Star break. And I've covered his whole career. I have all the respect in the world for Vladdy. I admire him as a player, as a person. It was not anything personal. But when your $500 million man is OPSing 815, 820 and hitting a lot of singles instead of breaking games open with home runs, I think it's okay to say the team needs a bit more from him. And I was not saying that he sucks, he's having a tank year. I was saying that the team needs a bit more from him because they're right on that cusp of greatness right now. And if that was happening in New York or Boston or Philly, a market where they have a little grit, I think a lot more than my tweet would have been written. That's the way I'll say it.
Yep.
But no, never any backlash. And I think the players and coaches know that if I write or say something, I'm not trying to be Stephen A. Smith. If I write it, I believe it. And if somebody had a problem with it, I'd have no problem telling them exactly why I typed it. So it's okay. And Vladdy has been spectacular since. And the way I look at it, and George Springer's an example of this, how I covered him last year versus this year. It's okay to say a guy is doing poorly or not doing enough, but the moment they're doing well, I better show up with just as much energy and say that they are doing well. So when Vladdy's had this stretch of games, I'll write that with just as much passion. And man, when he is going good, it's one of the coolest things in the world. I will be talking about covering Vladdy 30, 40 years from now.
Yep.
I'm confident.
And you talked about his swing, tweeted about it yesterday. Probably the best swing of the year, I think you said, or something like that. And it was one of the best ones. Also, I enjoyed the tweet. So a personal, I liked it. And funny enough, like you were probably the only reporter to tweet that out, I guess. it was the entire timeline for the past week was everyone talking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's not like it was some random thing that it was all over everywhere, myself included. So it was interesting there. But Keegan, anything you want to talk about your book as well, really quick before I wrap up? Everyone, the link's going to be in the description. This is the best time as ever to, or better time rather than ever to get it. Anything you want to say about that? It's been doing really well. Very happy for you there. And hopefully it, I mean, if the Jays win a World Series, then you have to write a book every single year then going forward to get the World Series back to Toronto every year.
I'm stuck with it now, but it's been going well, man. I can't believe it. Hardcovers are sold out in most places. You can still order online, Amazon, Indigo, places like that. But what are we now? July 26th. On August 12th, the paperback is going to come out. And going to paperback is a good thing. It means people bought the book, but also as it continues to sell out, we can get you paperbacks way quicker in stores. So when the hardcover released, it showed up in stores before the release date. Maybe the paperback shows up in Indigos before the date, and I'll panic less this time because now I know how the book publishing world works. But at the very latest, August 12th, paperback versions of the franchise will be in stores, available to read, and the Blue Jays keep being the best marketing department I could ever have, man. It's good timing.
Love it. And yeah, your book got leaked early, so maybe we'll see some trades get leaked early for the Toronto Blue Jays. Keegan, thank you for joining. Enjoy your the day in Detroit. Hopefully, the Jays can take care of business against Tariq Skubal and remain top in the MLB, which is something I never thought we were saying. But thank you for hopping on, and we'll see you again. Have you back soon.
You got it. Thanks, man.